Keir Starmer, once thought of as the steady hand of the Labour Party, has now become the architect of its self-destruction. His recent actions, or rather, his inactions, have created a political storm of his own making, one that could irreparably damage his party's standing in British politics. His failure to address the growing dissatisfaction among Labour's key supporters and donors has created an environment ripe for revolt. As Starmer flounders, panicking over every new scandal, he risks losing not just Labour's core values, but its future altogether. The political scene in the UK has reached a boiling point, with significant fallout after the allegations against the BBC and its potential links to terrorist organisations. Reform UK, a party positioning itself as the antidote to political complacency, has seized on these opportunities. With an unwavering voice, they've drawn attention to the BBC's handling of Hamas and its questionable editorial practices. While Labour ducks and weaves, trying to avoid conflict, Reform UK has made it clear that this is no time for complacency or blind allegiance to outdated institutions. And where does Starmer stand? In the most crucial debate of our time, where national security is at stake, where the integrity of our public broadcasters is questioned, Starmer is nowhere to be seen. His inability to take a firm stance has led to an exodus of key Labour donors, who no longer see his leadership as the path to restoring the party's relevance. It's an appalling sight for anyone who has watched Labour, under Starmer's direction, lose touch with the public and its own principles. The calls for accountability from Reform UK are not merely symbolic, they are rooted in a genuine, patriotic desire to ensure that British institutions operate without compromise. The accusations of incompetence levelled against the BBC by MPs like Nick Timothy are not hyperbole, they are a stark warning about the state of our media and the public trust. The suggestion that taxpayer money could be channeled to organisations like Hamas is a nightmare scenario. And yet, the BBC has failed to adequately address these concerns. They are guilty of offering misleading narratives, or worse, of being complicit in a broader, more dangerous narrative. Starmer, instead of taking decisive action to confront these issues head-on, continues to backpedal. The Labour Party, which once prided itself on championing the working class and maintaining the integrity of British institutions, has now become a shadow of its former self. The party's leadership has allowed radical elements to infiltrate its ranks, with a disregard for national security, and a desire to appease the most extreme factions of society. This is not leadership. This is pandering. The public's faith in institutions like the BBC is eroding fast, and yet Starmer's response has been to bury his head in the sand, hoping the storm will pass. It won't. The public is tired of excuses. The anger is palpable, and when people realize that their hard-earned taxes might be funding organizations that actively seek to harm them, they will not forgive the government, nor the BBC, for their negligence. The Reform UK party, with its sharp criticisms of the status quo, has tapped into a deep well of frustration. They have shown a clear willingness to hold the BBC accountable for its failure to adequately cover Hamas' true nature as a terrorist organization. The MPs calling for a criminal investigation into the BBC's funding practices are not doing so for political gain. They are doing it because they understand that this issue goes to the heart of our national security. Starmer, in contrast, has shown no such spine. His dithering has left a vacuum where decisive leadership is needed. Reform UK is positioning itself as the alternative, the party of the people, and the Labour Party is too weak and too fractured to respond effectively. The stakes could not be higher. This is not just a debate about the BBC or about the language used to describe Hamas. It is about the very nature of how we as a country confront the threat of terrorism. The BBC's failure to properly frame Hamas as a terrorist organization, when all the evidence points in that direction, undermines the global consensus on the matter. Starmer's lack of a coherent response to this crisis has allowed his party to become embroiled in a controversy that undermines its credibility at home and abroad. The BBC's failure to act has prompted calls for greater transparency and accountability. If public funds are being misused or misallocated, there must be consequences. Yet, where is Starmer in all this? He has failed to take the lead in demanding answers, and as a result, he has allowed the Conservative Party and Reform UK to dominate the narrative. If Starmer is unwilling to confront these challenges, if he is content to let the political elite continue to play games while our security is at risk, then he is unfit to lead. The Labour Party is teetering on the brink of collapse, not because of external forces, but because of Starmer's inability to adapt to the modern political landscape. His refusal to take on the media, his reluctance to address the real concerns of the British public, and his failure to restore integrity to his own party have created the conditions for a political insurgency. Reform UK is rising as the party that refuses to be silenced, the party that will speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. And in doing so, they are laying the foundation for a new, more robust political future, one that Starmer and Labour may soon find impossible to compete with. The writing is on the wall. Unless Keir Starmer finds the courage to act decisively, the Labour Party may well find itself relegated to the political margins. The public is watching, and they are no longer willing to accept weak leadership. The time for action is now, and if Starmer fails to step up, it may be too late.